Jordan Peele has started off as a pretty hit or miss director, so far a one hit wonder. He had one good movie and then one really bad movie. I know you can't judge movies this way, but based on this, his new movie will be good and his next movie will suck giant cocks. The one thing I will give him credit for, though, is that his movies seem to be his own, like they don't feel like someone else made them. His movies look like they're made well, but the stories aren't great. More specifically, the writing is filled with plot holes. Get Out, his first directing role, which is pretty good. The perspective is interesting and unique. There haven't been many horror movies that address racial tensions, the most famous example being Night of the Living Dead. So it's weird if anyone says these movies are SJW or whatever, since horror movies have been historically subverting audiences with social messages. A guy goes to his girlfriend's parents' house where he immediately questions the accommodating behavior of her family as it's a bit much, like a performance act, because he believes that they don't like their daughter is dating a black guy. She reassures him that he is her first black boyfriend, which he figures out is bullshit. He discovers that their family uses black people as vessels to transfer their consciousness into, because they see black people as trendy. In their words, black is in fashion. It's a fetishization of black people by white liberals. He is almost hypnotized by his girlfriend's hypnotist mother, but he literally picks cotton out of a chair, which of course is an allusion to slave labor. He uses it to plug his ears and prevent being stuck in the sunken place, basically a purgatory where they are controlled by the white people. You could say that this is a symbol of slavery. Jordan Peele himself says it means we're marginalized. No matter how hard we scream, the system silences us. The movie ends with the police showing up, of course, at the last minute to see a black guy strangling a white woman, but he does manage to escape. I think this ending was probably inspired by the Night of the Living Dead's ending. So the movie has great messaging and some interesting horror elements, but that's it. That's all they are, is elements. Us is a convoluted mess that is at its best not making sense, and at its worst a cringy piece of shit. It's just critic slash Oscar bait, which it didn't even win, which I'm glad it didn't win because it sucks. But it's a terrible precedent that the highest level of awards for movies, the Academy Awards, have only ever given 6 horror movie nominations for Best Picture. One of these nominations was actually Get Out. And only one of these 6 has ever actually won, which was Silence of the Lambs, which is really a thriller, not a horror movie. And if you actually look at the nominations, most aren't horror either. You've got The Exorcist, Jaws, The Silence of the Lambs, The Sixth Sense, Black Swan, and Get Out. I don't think people consider Jaws to be a horror movie anymore, like it's rated PG now. So really there's only one movie that is actually a horror movie, and that's The Exorcist. So we have this family that's being terrorized by a group of doppelgangers, each representing a family member. This turns into a fight for survival as they have to escape them, and that's the rest of the movie. Then they attempt to explain where they came from at the end, and up until this point you would think as though the creatures, the tethered, are some kind of supernatural entities, maybe sharing the consciousness of a larger entity, but no, they're actually just clones. The government decided to create them to control the American populace. There are so many problems with this, like why did they not just kill all of these clones? Did they not think that they would escape eventually? Especially since the tunnels to this top secret underground facility seem to be connected to carnival rides. Some of the concepts are good though, they're just poorly executed, leaving to more questions. Lovecraft proved that the unknown can not only be a part of the fear factor, but also the scariest thing. But that doesn't mean you should have to question every plot point. These movie creators are scared of creating coherent stories. His new movie, Nope, I prefer the original title Little Green Men. It's about some people who are looking after a ranch who notice something affecting the behavior of the animals and people. So aliens are fucking with people and killing them, so hopefully we get some gory kills, since it's R-rated. Now he says it's not a traditional horror movie, but I mean, I don't know if any of his movies are really traditional horror movies. Based on the trailer, it looks like they're going to be trying to catch UFOs on camera to prove that the aliens that keep returning are real. The movie apparently has good reception and is probably fully released by the time this video comes out, though it doesn't release here until early August. I did see a review though that said it's good at the start but becomes a bad M. Night Shyamalan movie with Spielberg elements and lacks any sense of story that is never fully fulfilled. So it sounds like it could turn out just like Us, being a convoluted mess, doing what sci-fi and horror movies have been doing lately, which is just take what Shyamalan did and act like it's original, which in their review they said it's like a bad M. Night Shyamalan movie, which sounds really bad because I fucking hate M. Night Shyamalan. But I'd take that with a grain of salt. I don't think it could be any worse than Us. Maybe I'm hopeful, but I think it might actually be more enjoyable than Get Out. So I'll wait to judge it, but even if it's good, it isn't horror. He isn't really making horror movies, maybe movies with themes you might see in horror movies, but he doesn't make that leap into horror. It's fine to be inspired by horror, I just think it's weird to present yourself as a horror director when you don't actually make horror movies. And he might have inspired some major studios to take some interest in horror movies, but is that a good thing? When, as we've seen over the years, horror barely even exists in the movies that the mainstream pushes. The actual horror movies still exist, but they remain underground, which is where the genre has almost always been. But this speaks to my problem with horror movies, which is that they try to strive for some deep meaning, which isn't in itself a problem, but they simultaneously try these mind-bending plots which just come off as pretentious. The worst part of all of this is that they're not even really horror. They're basically just drama thrillers. That's what horror is now. That's basically every A24 movie. I mean, look at Midsummer, that piece of shit garbage fire. How can you call that horror unless the horror was actually having to sit through it? Nothing happens for like the first 2 hours of the movie, and then they try to show some killings at the end that look less horrific than shit you'd see in like Criminal Minds. And I'm sick of people saying that we're currently in a horror renaissance. They've been saying this for like the last decade, and it's bullshit. The last decade had some great horror movies, but it's still not a great decade for horror, especially since most were terrible. It was an improvement on the 2000s, but it's still not a great decade. But anyway, back to Jordan Peele. What do you guys think? Do you think Jordan Peele saved horror? Do you think he's overrated? Or is it too early to say? You tell me in the comments, and when you're doing that, like and subscribe.